Welcome to Ollies. By the time you finish this section of the course, you will be able to pinpoint why you're struggling with Ollies. We're gonna start by covering exactly what is happening when you Ollie and some common misconceptions that could be getting in the way of your progress. A lot of people have the wrong idea about what's happening when you Ollie. The odds are, everything you think you know about Ollies is wrong. Let's talk about some common mistakes that I see when people are first trying their Ollies. The point that I really want to get across to you guys is that when we jump, our back foot never touches the ground. I can't say that enough. You are not jumping off of the ground, you are jumping off of the back truck. You are balancing on the board the whole time and you're jumping up off of the back truck and lifting your front leg up at the same time. If you want to hit your tail on the ground, your back foot being on the tail and lifting your front leg will push the tail down. When you jump, you have to jump off of the back truck, because if you try and jump off of the ground, you're gonna lock your tail up against the ground and you actually take away your pop and end up just jumping off of your board. So you have to jump off the truck and lift that front foot up high with you. Your weight does not go past your back trucks. And what I mean by that is when you're standing on the board and you lean yourself back, you get back seat to pick up the nose and plant your foot on the ground. I look at that as your weight passing the back truck. We want to keep our weight right over the back truck and we go straight down and straight up for the Ollie. We're not leaning forward and backward to make any of the pop happen. Another common mistake that I see is people hitting the ground with their back foot to jump, which I completely understand because that's a pretty intuitive feeling that you want to jump, so you want to feel your back foot on the ground. In reality, our back foot doesn't touch the ground. We are jumping off of the skateboard, not off of the ground. As soon as our back foot touches the ground, our pop is done for. When you're standing on the board, if your back foot is already on your tail, you have enough power in your tail already preloaded. It doesn't make any sense to push into the tail harder than what naturally comes from your stance with your back foot on the tail. As long as your weight is evenly distributed between your back and your front foot, you will have enough power in your tail already to make it hit the ground when you pop. You don't have to add pressure on your back foot to make your tail go down. I hear a lot of coaches saying that the key to an Ollie is sliding your front foot forward, but they're wrong. Sliding your front foot on the grip tape is a byproduct of popping and lifting your front leg. If you slide your front leg forward, you actually have no way of hitting the tail on the ground. And if you slide your front foot too far forward, you're actually gonna spread your legs too far apart and end up off of the board on either the nose or the tail. We take our front foot up first, and then it can go forward if we'd like. Picking up the nose. In this section, we're gonna cover your balance point. We're gonna cover lifting up your front leg and how you actually pick up the nose. We're gonna cover your foot position. This is important because being able to pick up your nose comfortably and efficiently is fundamental to every single trick you will do on a skateboard. Every trick that we do, whether we're ollieing, whether we're even navigating or moving around the park, it's good on vert, it's good everywhere you go. The things that we're gonna cover is how to pick up the nose the right way, meaning you're not worried that you're gonna fall back when you pick it up. You're not stuck to the ground over here. You actually have some skill now to be able to kind of change your foot position and change where your balance point is and still feel confident lifting the nose up. So where's your balance point on the skateboard when you're starting to pick up the nose? The first thing that's important is what keeps you safe. We want to keep a little bit more weight forward over those front trucks. If our weight is evenly distributed and we lean back as we pick up the nose, the board is going to skate away from us and we're going to fall backwards. Yes, I understand that this might make it harder to pick up the nose at first, but it's what's going to keep us safe. Our goal here is to feel confident that we can lift up the nose. Our weight is gonna be 60-40 on our front foot. We're gonna have more weight on our front foot than our back foot. And the real thing that's important here is that your weight will stay there the whole time. We're not gonna do a weight shift to lift the nose up. We wanna keep our weight over our front foot the whole time, the same weight distribution we have before, and lift the nose. As you change your balance point, like if you put more weight on your front foot up here, it's gonna be harder to lift the nose, but you can still do it. If your weight is like directly 50-50, it's gonna be a lot easier to lift the nose. I kind of think about that like, as we move back, we're gonna lighten up the nose because it's so much easier to lift. We only run into really big problems when we're shifting our weight to pick it up. Like, as I pick it up, if I'm leaning forward, it's just not possible to hold the nose up. And as I pick it up, if I'm leaning back, then that board's gonna start skating away from us and then we run into some real problems. Let's talk about the role that lifting your front leg has in picking up the nose. So we're on the skateboard and our back foot is on the tail and our front foot is on the middle of the board. Our front foot is completely glued to that skateboard. There is no way for you to lift your front foot off of the board. As you pick up your front foot, your board will follow your front foot right into the air. This feeling freaks a lot of people out at first, but as a seasoned skateboarder, this will actually feel very intuitive and very comfortable. We want to be picking up our front leg to lift the trucks, and we don't want to be rocking back and forth to create the energy to pick up that foot. If we're not shifting our weight to lift up the nose, how are we doing it? If we're planting our back foot on the tail and we have a somewhat even distribution of weight, 50-50, 60-40, with our back foot being on the tail, our front foot is glued to the board. You cannot lift your front foot off of the board with your back foot there. I promise you, okay? This is actually how a lot of people run into problems when they first start skating. They hop on, and then when they want to get off, they try to step on the ground with their front foot, and the board is just stuck to you, okay? So we want to get used to that, feeling that our front foot is stuck to the board, and we just want to pick this leg straight up. We want to lean on balance and confidence in that front leg because that's what's going to get us around the park. So as we lean forward to get some stability over that front leg, it's gonna feel like you have to lift your front leg higher than usual to pick it up. That's a normal feeling, and that's completely okay. I want you to even lean into that, get used to lifting that front knee way up if we have to. That feeling of lifting your front knee way up is a feeling that we're gonna explore when we start popping ollies. To lift the nose, we're picking our front leg straight up. It's as simple as that. We're not going in, we're not going out, we're not shifting our weight. We're just picking this front leg straight up. Once you understand that, skateboarding will start to open up for you, for sure. When we talk about adjusting our foot position, I want your back foot halfway up the tail. I don't want your back foot all the way at the top towards the edge of the tail where it's like hanging off of the board. I want you to mess with your front foot though. Let's start with our front foot on our front bolts and try to lift the nose from there. And as we move that front foot back, we can check how light the nose gets. As your feet get closer together, your nose is gonna get lighter and lighter, and it's easier and easier to lift it off of the ground. So now you know how to lift your front leg. As you change your foot position, what's gonna happen? Okay, if you drop your front foot, you're gonna start lightening up the nose again. That nose is gonna be so easy to pick up. If your front foot is all the way up on the nose, that nose is gonna be a lot harder to pick up. The reason is because of a couple of things. The first part is like, your weight is more over the center of the board if your front foot is further up. And if it's way down, your weight's over the back of the board. So your weight placement is really gonna affect how easy or hard it is to lift the nose. But another thing that's actually important is if you just look at the height of the board, right? If my front foot is up here, I have to lift my foot this high. I mean, I just have to lift my leg that high, okay? If my front foot is down here, I only have to lift my leg this high, okay? So if my feet are close together, I only have to lift my foot this high and the nose is all the way in there. Where if it's spread out, I actually have to lift it quite a long ways. So as you move that front foot down, it's really gonna change how maneuverable the skateboard is. So definitely play with that. Play with some different foot positions and some weight placements and kind of see how that board is working. Now that we've covered the components of lifting up the nose, we're gonna do some Tic Tacs. A Tic Tac is the motion of gaining speed by moving your front truck back and forth. This is gonna give you a lot of feel for your skateboard, and it's really gonna help you as you move towards popping the board. Tic Tacs should free you up on the board and make skating feel more natural. Now that we can lift our nose up, the first natural thing that's gonna come for us is Tic Tacs. Okay, what a Tic Tac really is the act of gaining speed through just kind of turning that nose left and right. So if you're complete brand new, I want you just to be able to pick up the nose and move it back and forth, all right? You should feel like you can pick up the nose and turn it and set it down softly, okay? I don't want this. I don't want you feeling like you're falling onto the nose every time. I just want you to be able to pick it up and set it down. That's simple. Seriously, that simple. For the Tic Tac beginner drill, we're gonna start standing completely still on our skateboard, picking up the nose and putting the wheels to the left and then to the right. And we're gonna just repeat that until we feel comfortable. You might even start moving forward as you do that. We control our nose with our front foot. You know, you can lift up your front foot and that board will follow. But if you lift it up and put your front foot out in front of you, board's gonna follow. You lift it up, put that front foot behind you, the board's gonna follow. Okay, so you control where that nose is by just putting your front foot in different places. So without the board, it'd be literally picking up the front foot and putting it down in different places. And I want you to feel that when you're practicing it. There are ways to kind of wind up and throw your weight around and feel like the board is following you, but no matter what, I want you to remember that the board is actually just following your front foot. So now that we're comfortable picking up our front truck and moving it left and right while standing still, let's try that same thing, but while we're already moving. Our goal really isn't to gain a lot of speed, but our goal is to have the confidence to be able to pick the nose up and move it around while we're moving. Since we're moving, you have to understand that the risk is a little bit higher, right? If we're moving and we shift our weight back, it's a lot more dangerous than if we're staying still. Okay, that board is gonna start skating away from you like right away and you're gonna end up on the floor, okay? While we're moving, you really wanna make sure to remember that we keep our weight the same distribution the whole time. The stakes are a bit higher now, right? But you should be comfortable being able to move and lift that nose up and just get it back and forth, okay? While setting that nose down nice and soft. Now that you've mastered the first two drills, it's time to start gaining speed with your Tic Tac. Gaining speed is what the Tic Tac actually is. Now, as you move your front trucks left and right, I want you to feel your back wheels rolling on the ground and gaining momentum with each turn. Using your back wheels on the ground to gain speed. You should feel confident in this and be able to gain enough speed to move forward comfortably. Gaining speed from the Tic Tac is like when you're turning to the left, that inside wheel, so that left wheel is gonna stay still and that outside wheel is gonna roll forward, okay? And then we'll probably carry a little bit of speed this way, and then we lock this wheel down, we lock the inside wheel down for the right turn, and that outside wheel comes around, okay? I don't want the back wheels just turning, right? We wanna feel like we're able to push off the ground and we can start getting some momentum, okay? As you get more comfortable with that, you can actually gain a lot of speed with Tic Tacs. So get an in-depth feel for how we're able to push off the ground and build some momentum without letting your wheels slip out. Again, maintain that brain to front foot connection. Understand that you're picking up that front leg and putting it where you want as you're starting to push off the ground. And we definitely want to be setting the nose down lightly every single time. As you're pushing off the ground on your back foot, you really want to make sure your wheels aren't like starting to slide out, because both front side and back side, you're gonna be kind of pushing off of the ground with your back foot, and you just gotta be careful that you're not letting your wheels actually slide out. So as you walk that line of the most pressure you can put in the ground, that's what's gonna gain the most speed. But as soon as your back wheels slide out, you're gonna lose it. Now that we're comfortable lifting up our nose and we have control with our Tic Tacs, we're gonna start hitting our tail on the ground. This is important because it's our foundation to get up into the air. So even though we're not gonna worry about popping right now, I wanna make it so we can connect our tail to the ground confidently and consistently, and we just know exactly where that ground is, and we know a couple of different ways to get there. We're gonna follow the same principles as we did for just lifting up the nose, but we're gonna take it a step further for when we actually rest the tail on the ground. The motion that your front leg takes to hit your tail on the ground is very simple. I want you to lift your front knee straight up without internally rotating your hip. Pay attention to that motion because that's exactly what your front leg will be doing when you ollie. We want to just lift our front leg up enough that we give our board space, we give the nose space to come up. As we're lifting our front leg up further, it becomes more and more important to not get a crazy amount of inward hip rotation or, you know, just start doing weird things. We want the bottom of our front foot to be facing the board, to be facing the ground, our knee over our foot, and everything lined up here, okay? Because that's gonna be fundamental, that's foundational work for as we start doing ollies. Okay, if you're doing this, it's not gonna translate to ollies. So when we hit the tail on the ground, the thing that I want you to focus on is keeping your weight over your front foot. Let's keep it at 60% on your front foot. And you lift your front leg high enough to where that tail locks into the ground. We know if our balance point is off because when we hit the tail on the ground and leave it there, if those wheels keep rolling forward, that means we're leaning too far back. If you struggle to lift that front truck up and the wheels are rolling backwards, that means we're leaning too far forward. Change where your front foot is to lighten up your front truck. Bring your feet closer together, bring your leg all the way up, and you should be able to stop standing on your tail. The next thing that I want to cover is where our balance point is over the back truck. Because when we're up here, we're balancing over the back truck, okay? But where exactly, how is that working, okay? As you move your back foot away from the back truck, you're gonna be more and more likely to fall behind the board and just be standing on the ground, okay? It's not dangerous, but let's pay attention to what our goal is here, is setting a foundation for an ollie. So what we really wanna do is have our back foot a little bit closer to the truck and feel like we're standing on this back truck as we lift the nose. And even right now, I can feel that back truck with my back foot, okay? And this is the spot that we're gonna be doing ollies from, not back here. It's only a small difference visually, but the feeling of it is a completely different world than just falling off of the back of the board and planting my foot on the ground. One translates to ollies and one does not. Having our back foot closer to the bolts will give you the ability to balance over the back trucks while lifting the nose. We want to balance over the back trucks at all times while lifting the nose. As you move your back foot further up the tail, it becomes harder to balance over your back truck as you lift the nose. You become more and more likely to fall behind the board. Now that you're comfortable hitting your tail on the ground, let's cover jumping. We have to be comfortable with our feet leaving the ground. By the time this section is over, you will be able to do hippy jumps and you'll have a deeper understanding of how the board reacts when we get air. Let's do hippy jumps in a way that will help our ollies. Ollies aren't determined by just how high you can jump. They're determined by how high you can lift your feet. When we're doing hippy jumps, I want you to focus on two things. The first thing is keeping your shins in front of your body, and the second is keeping the bottom of your feet parallel to the ground. As we move towards ollies, you're gonna learn that the bottom of your feet are the same thing as your wheels. If your feet are pointed out to the side, your wheels are pointed there too. If you can't keep your shins in front of your body, or the bottoms of your feet aren't parallel to the ground, it's not gonna translate to ollies very well. As we move from board control stuff to ollies, there's this thing in the middle where we're getting comfortable being in the air. Absolutely 100% necessary to have good ollies. So a couple things that I wanna start with is just your foot path and your leg path, okay? We see a lot of ollies and different tricks where people are going like this, okay? They're jumping like this. And that's really not gonna work. It's not gonna translate to ollies that well. What I want you to focus on, especially in this section where we're just jumping or doing hippy jumps, is the bottom of your feet are facing the ground the whole time. I want the bottom of your feet parallel with the ground. And I want your shins in front of your body. I don't want your shins coming underneath you like this. Your knees should have space to come up so they can basically hit your shoulders. So that's what we're gonna be doing with our feet. And now as we step on the board, it's the same thing. So as we start doing hippy jumps on the board, it's the same thing. We're not doing this and just jumping and picking up our feet behind us, because that's not gonna help. The thing that I want you to practice here is actually jumping and feeling like you're light on your feet, like you're able to land softly, like you're able to float in the air without tripping. And then once you're comfortable having some separation away from the board, and once you're comfortable jumping, we can start bringing the board with us. Because that feeling of doing a hippy jump and actually jumping off of the board is much closer to an ollie than just slamming the tail in the ground. To do a hippy jump while we're moving, you might have to feel like you're sending the board a little bit forward as you jump. It's a common mistake to jump off the board and land in front of it so you can only get your back foot on. As you practice this, you will gain a better understanding of where you are relative to the board while you're in the air. I just want you to focus on floating in the air and having that consistently good foot and leg path. You're not landing too hard, and it also is gonna give you a feel for where you are in the air relative to where the board is, right? If you find yourself jumping this way, you're gonna have to start adjusting it and being able to float directly over the board. You know, when I was learning hippy jumps, it felt like I had to shoot the board forward when I jumped, but that's gonna be different feelings for everyone. Now that we're comfortable with hippy jumps, let's start combining a hippy jump and lifting the nose. This is the fundamental process of an ollie. As you practice this, you will feel what it's like for your tail to bounce off the ground and get some air. Our goal here is not to get as much air as possible, but our goal here is to really feel how light we can be on the board and what it feels like when that tail touches the ground and your board releases from the ground. Let's keep our hippy jump very low, and let's focus on jumping off of the back truck and starting to feel that front truck come up with us. As we get more comfortable with that, let's slowly add a little bit more power to our jump. I want you to feel like you're throwing your tail down at the ground by jumping off of the board. You can control how low that tail is going by how high you lift your front foot when you jump. If you keep your front foot low, your tail will not hit the ground and your board will stay on the ground. If you lift your front truck higher, your tail will hit the ground and you can start floating. Doing this exercise will feel loose at first, but that's okay. Over time, you will gain more control over your board and you will gain more confidence when you're jumping. This is the single most important building block to an ollie. An ollie feels like I'm lifting up the nose just a little bit and I'm jumping. My front foot is coming up like this much. It feels like a hippy jump and it feels like I'm lifting up the nose. So you see how I'm able to float over the board and off the ground, but the nose is coming with me? That's really the piece that you have to learn to be able to do ollies. You can control how low your tail gets, meaning like if you want it to touch the ground or if you don't, by how high you lift your front leg. If I lift my front leg really high and I jump just like we were doing, that tail is gonna slap into the ground and that board is gonna bounce up. If I keep my front foot low, that tail isn't gonna hit the ground and my board's never gonna leave the ground. Let's get one thing straight here that we're gonna cover again in the actual ollie section. But I am jumping off of the truck. My weight is on the truck when I'm jumping. I am not touching the ground and then doing a hippy jump from there, okay? I'm jumping off of the skateboard, okay? If I don't lift my front leg, this is what happens. If I do lift my front leg, that happens, okay? Pay attention to that. I'm not doing I'm not even in that realm of skating like that, okay? We're jumping off of the back truck straight up with our weight in the same spot. We're deciding how high we want the board by how much we're lifting our front leg. Now that we can hippy jump and touch our tail on the ground, we're gonna cover the ins and outs of popping and we're gonna ollie. Before we start popping, we first have to understand what it means. So when someone says, oh, he has a good pop, they mean that when they ollie, that the board is coming up at their feet at a high speed. The faster you can get the board to come up with you, the more control you have in the air because you have more pressure up against the board and now you can make adjustments in the air. A good pop means that you can bring the board up vertically at a high speed. That's essentially what a good pop is, okay? If your pop is bad, your board's gonna be stuck to the ground and your feet are gonna be leaving your board behind and you're not gonna be able to maneuver the board very much in the air. Where if you have a good pop, you can pick it up and since the board is coming up at you real fast, you can actually make a lot of adjustments in the air. So that's what a pop actually is. Let's focus on balance. The thing you want to make sure to get right is we keep our balance in the same spot for the entire ollie. If we set up at 60% of our weight on our front foot, we keep it there for the ollie. I don't want you shifting your weight back to pick up the nose, or I don't want you shifting your weight forward as you pop. If you shift your weight backwards when you pop, you will land on the board and slip out. If you shift your weight forwards when you pop, your tail is gonna have such a hard time reaching the ground and your board is gonna run away from you backwards. Okay, let's figure out how to get a good pop. The same fundamentals that we built on earlier, that's what we're gonna use to pop. If I lean back and put my foot on the ground, my board will not follow me up, okay? Ever, like ever. We're jumping off of the skateboard and we're lifting our front leg up. The higher we jump and the faster we lift that front leg, the harder the tail is gonna smash into the ground and the better that pop is gonna be. How do ollies work? Well, the first thing that I wanna cover is how you should feel when you're doing ollies. You should feel like you're free from the ground. You should feel like you're able to jump and that board is following you up. Everything about an ollie is going up, away from the ground. We're not going down, we're not stomping down into the ground and getting stuck there. We want to build some confidence that that board is following our feet up. I don't want you to think of an ollie like we're dragging the board with our front foot and we're trying to pick it up with our front foot. What our front foot actually does is stops the nose from coming up at about this point, right? So an ollie, I want you to think about your front foot like it's my hand, okay? You're gonna try to put your front foot up here so this nose runs into your foot and that tail starts to come up with it. Okay, then your back foot stops the tail from coming up. Let's see if we can do it. Okay, so that's how an ollie is really gonna feel. On the way up, the board is running into you, and on the way down, you're pushing down into the board. Let's get a really strong ollie. I don't mean high, I mean strong. What I mean by strong is that there needs to be consistent pressure up against the board at all times while you're in the air. On the way up, I want you to feel the pressure from the board into your feet. And on the way down, I want you to feel your feet pushing into the board. When we're first starting out with ollies, what I care about is that you get a consistent pop and you get a strong pop, okay? I don't care how high they are, but I want consistency and I want a strong pop, meaning that that board is running into your feet on the way up, okay? It can be right here. It can be just that high. Without my board, it's literally just that much. If I don't want to bring the board with me, I'm only picking my feet up this high. But that's enough to connect the tail to the ground and get that board coming up. I don't want you to worry too much about rhythm, about tempo, about height, about floating. I literally, as soon as you feel your tail hit the ground, I want you to push your feet back into the ground so it's that small and it's that quick. If you can do that every time, you can really start working on your ollies. Now that we can pop and get into the air, let's get comfortable with our ollies. We can focus on our in-air tempo. We can focus on landing softly. What happens when we start moving while doing ollies, and how to get up and down obstacles. You already did the hard part. Now let's focus on our in-air tempo. Almost everybody is in a rush to get back on the ground when they pop. We're gonna focus on floating and being in the air for the maximum amount of time that our ollie allows. This will dramatically affect your learning curve because as you start flipping the board, it's absolutely necessary that you know how to float above it. We don't have to jump any higher or do anything crazy, but we can start floating a little bit longer in the air. A major thing I see with people when they're first learning ollies is they don't know how to go from here 2, nice and floaty. And I wanna let you know that it's probably because as you jump, as you get further from the ground, you start searching for the ground by extending your legs down, okay? That would look like this, where I'm jumping higher, but I don't wanna be that far from the ground, so I started extending my legs. That's what we're gonna work on avoiding. We're just gonna get up, pick our legs up, and then float down. When I say land softly, I mean that you're not pushing your feet into the ground any harder than necessary. You should feel yourself go up into the air, float, and land at the speed of gravity. It's really easy to slam your feet in the ground when you get nervous. We're gonna try to override that feeling and get comfortable floating down onto our board. So now that we can pick our legs up and float, it's important to visualize that we're gonna be landing softly. We don't wanna pick it up and then smash the board into the ground. We wanna let everything fall at the same pace. The reason that we wanna practice this is because as we start flipping our board, if we start moving our feet too fast into the ground, we're gonna get in the way of our own flick, and even if it flips all the way, we're actually gonna be kicking the board down away from our feet and lose our ability to catch the board. So this practice to get good rhythm in your ollies and to actually have good tempo and to land soft is actually very beneficial when we start flipping the board. As we're moving faster when doing our ollies, it becomes more and more important to maintain a constant balance point over our front foot. People's tendency is to start leaning back more and more when we're moving while doing ollies. This will just make you land on the tail and that board's gonna shoot out in front of you. All the same things we just discussed, except the stakes are higher, and we have to make sure that in the air, we're paying attention, we're covering ground. So I can no longer think of the ollie right here. I have to think of the ollie this way, where I'm landing, and then probably 3 seconds of riding afterwards. So we're actually gonna cover a lot of space. And if you can visualize that in your head, if you can conceptualize how much ground you're really covering, it's gonna help you see your tricks in your head. Okay, yes, my ollie is happening right here, but in reality, it's happening over there and that direction. So we just get that in our head so we can stay over the front of the board a lot easier. Yes, the stakes are higher in the sense that when we're moving, it's gonna be easier to fall backwards, and it's gonna be more dangerous if you do. It's probably gonna hurt a little more. So make sure you get your fundamentals right and make sure you hold your weight a little bit over your front foot and you'll be fine. Let's go up a small feature, like a curb or a manual pad. Your foot placement is gonna be your best friend here. Generally, the lower the object that we're ollieing onto, the higher we can have our front foot. This can help us control the height of our ollie while giving us the most stability on the board. Considering that our fundamentals are strong, we know we're ollieing off the truck and we're controlling the height of the board with our front leg. We're actually doing that same thing here, just relative to the manual pad. So I know that I gotta clear my front truck over this, so my front foot has to get about this high. I don't wanna overshoot the jump, so I'm just flying up here and landing down on the manual pad. I wanna have confidence in my eyes that when I'm getting onto a manual pad, that I know exactly how high to lift my feet, and I don't have to lift them any higher than that because I trust my board is coming up with me. Instead of imagining it like you're jumping onto something, I actually want you to imagine it like you're walking upstairs. Like you're walking upstairs this way. That front foot comes up and that back foot comes up after. But the thing that makes it like stairs is if you watch my head is actually staying pretty still, okay? I'm not feeling like I'm just jumping up onto this thing. I'm just picking up my legs that high. you're picking up your feet as high as the ledge. You're not jumping onto it. Now is the time in this course where I want you to be spending a lot of time working on drills and doing it over and over and over again until you're like 100% consistent. The better you get at these drills, the better you will be at skateboarding. The first drill that we're gonna do is when we ollie, we're gonna be able to pick both of our knees up as high as we can. Yes, we're gonna jump high, but we're not necessarily gonna jump as high as we can. We're gonna pick our knees up as high as we can. This will probably end up strengthening your hips, to be honest, but really what the goal is to make sure our pop is strong enough to follow our legs all the way up, no matter how high we pick them up. What I want you to feel at the top of your ollie is that board is still coming up at you. And then as we start dropping with gravity, we can start pushing back into the board, back onto the ground. You should be able to ollie and pick your knees up as high as you can without the board feeling loose on your feet. The next drill we're gonna do is a nose bone. I don't wanna do it out here. Okay, I don't wanna do it out forward, although that is cool, and you can do that on your own time. But for this drill, we're actually trying to push the nose down. Separation between the front truck and the back truck vertically. That would look more like this. The reason that we want vertical separation is because we get to practice our weight distribution on our front foot and our back foot, and we're gonna be using that on our 180s and our kick flips and all of that stuff later in this course. So really feel like you can get some vertical separation. To do it, to get the nose lower than the tail, we wanna make sure we go through the whole ollie process. That we set the height of the ollie with our front foot, and then as we lift our back foot to that height, that front foot starts extending. We don't just leave the nose down and try to pick up the tail, okay? We set the height of the ollie with the nose, and then as we lift our back foot, that's when we can start pushing our nose back down and feel all the pressure on the board from our back foot only. The next drill that I want you to do is sort of a similar one to the nose bone, but it's where we ollie and land on the nose. This is important because that genuine weight shift forward, we're gonna use that on our kick flips. The reason it's hard is if you're in a rush to get forward, everything's gonna start running away from you backside. And if you actually get a good pop, it might be hard to get that nose down to actually get that weight shift forward. But if you get this consistent, your flick for your kick flips will really improve. Again, we set the height of our ollie with our front foot. Then when we're up here, it's okay to feel like we're either moving the board backwards or we're trying to get up and over the nose. I'm cool with either of those feelings. If we move the board backwards, that'll put us over the nose. If we just ollie up and over the top of the board, that'll also put us on the nose, and I'm cool with either. As we want to ollie as high as we can, we want to drop our front foot to the halfway point on the board. There's not a real spot that's technically like the highest ollie. All we're trying to do is take our front foot low enough so we can free up the nose. So when we lift our front foot up, that nose can start coming straight up because we're setting the height of the ollie with the height of the nose. So just logically, if my front foot is more on the nose, I'm gonna have to lift my front foot a lot higher to get the board up versus if my foot's just down here. So we're just trying to get out of the way of the skateboard and be able to pick it up quickly and as high as we can.